about to...
Problem, and it's wearing red again. A few weeks ago, Man United were losing to Grimsby Town and getting embarrassed by City.
I'm asking, City are in the lead, headed home.
Now, under Rúben Amorim, they're suddenly tactical, disciplined, and dangerous. It's not the same chaotic United anymore, and if this evolution continues, the Premier League might just have a Manchester United problem. But what are the changes, and why are they suddenly looking like title challengers? This season, Manchester United have looked really bad, and when I say bad, I mean really bad. It started with that loss to Arsenal. You could actually see glimpses of good football in that game. The build-up was cleaner, the movement looked sharper, but it just didn't click. They played well, but not well enough to win. Then came the draw with Fulham, and that's where the frustration really kicked in. United had possession, they created half chances, but there was no control. It felt like a team that didn't know what it wanted to be. And then came the moment that broke the internet. The loss to Grimsby Town. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a humiliation. A Premier League giant, outplayed and outworked by a side that most fans couldn't even name a player from. The reaction online was brutal, and honestly, it was deserved. The derby against Manchester City followed, and that was painful to watch. A 3-0 loss that showed just how far United had fallen behind. They looked lost, passive, and completely unprepared for City's tempo and movement. After that was that nervy 2-1 win against Chelsea, one they probably wouldn't have gotten if not for a red card. It didn't feel like progress, it felt like survival. And then came the game that changed everything, the 3-1 loss to Brentford. That was a day Rúben Amorim got completely exposed. It wasn't just a bad performance, it was a tactical disaster. Brentford didn't just beat United, they used Amorim's own system against him. The game against Brentford exposed everything wrong with Amorim's setup at the time. His rigidity, his lack of adjustment, and his over-reliance on a system that clearly wasn't working. From the opening whistle, you could tell something was off. Brentford weren't doing anything extraordinary, they were just smart. They set up in almost the same formation as United, but they executed it better. They used width, vertical passes, and quick rotations that completely dismantled Amorim's pentagon pressing structure. You see, Amorim's pressing model depends on coordinated triggers, 5 players forming that compact shape to suffocate build-up. But Brentford broke it apart with simple movements. Their defenders spread wide, their midfielders dropped deep, and suddenly United's press had no one to mark. Bruno and Ugarte were pressing empty space, running towards shadows. Brentford's keeper and backline just passed through them like it was training. That's the thing, pressing isn't just about energy, it's about angles, and United's angles were all wrong. Brentford pulled them narrow, stretched the field, and created passing lanes between every United player. It looked disorganised, slow, and reactive. Then came the defensive transitions, and that was the real nightmare. Every time Brentford went long toward their striker, United's backline looked lost. Ligt and Shaw were constantly caught between stepping up or dropping off, which left massive gaps. Brentford's forwards thrived in those moments, winning second balls, hitting defenders, and dragging them out of shape. And it wasn't just the defenders. The midfield was nowhere to be found. Ugarte and Bruno were too high, leaving acres of space behind them. That gap between midfield and defence was a gift to Brentford. They kept finding runners in those pockets over and over again. When nothing was working, Amorim's big response was to ask Diogo Dalot to throw long balls into the box from the touchline. That's not adaptation, that's desperation. Brentford, one of the most disciplined teams in England at defending set pieces, handled it without breaking a sweat. The most frustrating part? Amorim had everything he needed to prepare. Manchester United have one of the most advanced analysis teams in Europe. They track patterns, scout opposition tendencies, and run detailed pre-match simulations. So when you see a manager stand there, refusing to change a shape that's being exposed in real time, it's hard not to call it what it was. He got out-coached. This defeat wasn't about luck or poor finishing, it was structural. Brentford didn't just beat Manchester United, they dismantled their identity. Amorim's principles, his shape, his build-up patterns, all turned against him. And sometimes that kind of defeat is necessary, because for the first time since he arrived, Amorim had to confront the truth. His system wasn't enough. The Premier League is too fast, too detailed, and too unpredictable for stubborn tactics. That night against Brentford forced him to evolve. You could almost feel it in the following weeks. Amorim starting to adapt, experiment, and change things mid-game. He went from being rigid and idealistic to being flexible and situational. And that transformation became clear in the very next big test, against Liverpool. The match against Liverpool was where everything changed. It wasn't just another fixture, it was the first real sign that Rúben Amorim had learned from Brentford. You could feel it in the way United approached the game, the structure, the discipline, the adjustments. For the first time all season, they didn't look lost, they looked prepared. But before we continue, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Amorim completely ditched his old 5-2-3 setup and switched to a 5-4-1. It might sound like a minor tweak, but it changed everything. In his usual 5-2-3, the two central midfielders, usually Casemiro and Bruno, were often isolated. The gaps on either side of them were too big, which left the defence exposed and gave opponents easy access into those half spaces. Against Liverpool, that would have been a disaster, especially with how their midfielders and fullbacks like to invert and overload those channels. So Amorim pulled his wide forwards, Mount and Mbeumo, deeper into midfield, forming a compact four-man block. Suddenly, United's shape became narrower, more connected, and harder to play through. That 5-4-1 wasn't defensive, it was calculated. It forced Liverpool away from the middle, made them play wide, and completely disrupted their rhythm. You could see Liverpool trying to create their usual triangles on the flanks with Robertson and Bradley pushing high, but every time they did, United's shape shifted perfectly to close them down. They couldn't get into the pockets where Szoboszlai or McAllister usually received the ball. Amorim had essentially shut off Liverpool's most dangerous zones. Then there was the approach out of possession, and this is where the tactical evolution really stood out. Amorim didn't want United to just sit deep and wait, he wanted control over transitions. So he came up with a plan built around what you could call the Van Dijk trap. Instead of random long balls, United targeted one specific area, Van Dijk's side. Not because they expected to win headers, but because Amorim wanted to disrupt Liverpool's build-up rhythm. Mbeumo's pressing on Van Dijk wasn't about taking the ball, it was about forcing awkward clearances. Behind him, Amorim set up a second ball structure. Shaw or Ligt would step into midfield, giving United an extra man around the loose ball. It looked chaotic, but it was actually rehearsed. That's how United won so many duels in midfield. And it's no coincidence that their first goal, after just over a minute, came directly from that setup. Van Dijk won the first header, United picked up the second ball, and within seconds, Mbeumo was in the box finishing the move. That wasn't luck, that was Amorim's preparation paying off. As the game went on, Amorim kept adjusting. When Liverpool started pushing their defensive line higher, he made a small tweak. Instead of pressing with all three forwards, he dropped Mount slightly deeper and had the fullbacks, Dalot and Ahmad, tuck inside. That created a square of four players ready to counter-press whenever the ball dropped loose. It gave United better control in midfield without sacrificing their width in transition. And that's what stood out most, how organised United looked even in chaos. Every press, every recovery, every movement felt deliberate. Amorim wasn't chasing possession, he was chasing territory. He didn't care about having 65% of the ball, he cared about what happened in the moments that mattered. Now there were trade-offs. United only completed around 2/3 of their short passes, not because they were sloppy, but because Amorim accepted the risk. He knew Liverpool thrived when you play slow, possession-heavy football. So instead, he forced Liverpool to deal with unpredictability, long passes, loose balls, constant transitions. He took them out of their comfort zone. That's the version of Amorim United fans wanted to see. One who reads the game, adapts to the opponent, and makes decisions based on control, not pride. He wasn't chasing ideology, he was chasing results. By the end of that match, you could feel a shift. United weren't perfect, but they looked like a team with direction again. Amorim showed he could let go of his system or adapt it to another when needed, that he could adjust to the realities of the Premier League. And if the Liverpool game proved that Amorim could adapt, the next one, against Brighton, showed that he could master it. That's where his tactical evolution reached another level. This time, Amorim didn't want chaos, he wanted control through aggression. After the calm, disciplined setup against Liverpool, Amorim looked at Brighton and knew he had to change again. Brighton is one of the most structured teams in England. They build vertically, play through the lines, and invite pressure just to break it. That kind of system kills teams that press without purpose. But Amorim didn't fall for the trap. He flipped it on his head. From the very first whistle, Manchester United pressed man for man. It wasn't a deep block or a reactive setup, it was pure front foot defending. Amorim told his players to step high, to stay tight, and to trust each other's positioning. Ligt followed Danny Welbeck deep into midfield, cutting off his ability to link play. Shaw, on the other hand, pressed aggressively on the left, leaving no time or space for Brighton's wide rotations. It was risky, but it was controlled risk. Amorim wanted to dictate the tempo without losing the defensive shape that cost him against Brentford earlier in the season. The idea was simple. If Brighton wanted to build vertically, United would meet them head-on. No waiting, no retreating. Every player stepped forward with intensity, but never without coordination. The reward came quickly. United's second goal was a direct product of this structure. A high press, a perfectly timed jump, a forced turnover, and an instant attack that ended with the ball in the net. It wasn't an accident. It was exactly how Amorim had drawn it up. But Amorim's genius isn't just in the press itself. It was in how he structured the midfield. Brighton's system relies on creating a box in midfield, two holding players who receive from the centre-backs, and two advanced midfielders who operate between the lines. That box gives them control and numerical superiority in possession. Amorim studied that and decided to mirror it. Casemiro, Bruno, Shaw and Ligt formed their own mirror box, matching Brighton's structure man for man. This move changed everything. By replicating Brighton's shape, Amorim stripped them of their biggest advantage, control of the centre. Suddenly, Brighton couldn't find their passing lanes. Every time they tried to play through the middle, a United player was there waiting. They were forced to go wide, and that was exactly where Amorim wanted them. United set pressing traps on the flanks, with Shaw or Dalot pushing high, supported by Bruno or Casemiro shifting across. The press would collapse, the ball would be won, and United would transition instantly. 3 of United's 4 goals came directly from those wide turnovers. It was Brighton's own game plan turned against them. But what made this so effective was how intelligent the pressing was. This wasn't the frantic, chaotic press United fans saw earlier in the season. Players weren't chasing shadows, they were reading body cues. When to close down, when to hold shape, when to force a backward pass. Amorim had drilled timing into them. If a Brighton player received with his back to goal, that was the trigger. If a pass was slightly underhit, that was another. And when the press was beaten, they didn't panic, they recovered their shape instantly. The aggression had structure. It was pressing with purpose, not emotion. There was also something new in how United attacked once they won possession. Amorim built a vertical structure through midfield, a sort of axis that stretched from Casemiro to Bruno. Casemiro stayed deep, orchestrating from behind, while Bruno pushed higher, linking play with Šeško and the wingers. This gave United clearer passing lanes and a sense of direction. Instead of aimless long balls, every forward pass had intent. When the team transitioned, it looked fast, but never frantic. It was smooth, measured, and lethal. Šeško played a massive role in setting the tone for this. His pressing was tireless. Every time Brighton tried to recycle the ball back to their defenders, Šeško was on them instantly. He didn't just close space, he forced mistakes. His movement triggered the rest of the team's press, and behind him, Bruno, Cunha, and Casemiro would lock onto their marks. It was pressing as a chain reaction. One player moved and the rest followed in rhythm. The recoveries, the tackles, the interceptions, none of it was random. It looked rehearsed, and that's because it was. Even the substitutes fit into the plan seamlessly. When Manu and Heaven came on, nothing about the system changed. The press stayed tight, the spacing stayed compact, and the intensity never dropped. That kind of consistency only comes from clear tactical communication. It showed how deeply Amorim's ideas had sunk into the squad. These weren't players reacting on instinct anymore, they were executing a collective plan. For the first time in years, Manchester United looked like a side with a real tactical identity. They weren't just defending deep or counter-attacking for the sake of it, they were controlling the flow of the game through coordinated aggression. Amorim had given them structure that could shift from deep block to high press, from compact containment to full-on domination, depending on the opponent. And it's that adaptability that now defines Amorim's United. He's shown that he can morph from game to game without losing discipline, without losing balance, and most importantly, without losing belief. This isn't about copying ideas, it's about mastering flexibility. Amorim has built a version of Manchester United that can suffocate opponents in multiple ways, something they haven't had since the Ferguson era, and if this keeps up, the Premier League might be in serious trouble. At this point, what's really standing out about Rúben Amorim isn't just the results, it's a transformation in his mentality. When he first arrived, you could tell he was obsessed with having a perfect system. Everything had to look clean, organised, symmetrical. He wanted his 3-4-2-1 to work, no matter who the opponent was, as if football could be solved with a single formula. And for a while, that rigidity was his biggest flaw. It's exactly what cost him against Brentford. He refused to change, even when it was obvious that the game demanded it. But now, that Amorim is gone. The version we're seeing today is far more flexible, far more pragmatic. You can tell he's learned that sometimes it's not about having the perfect system, it's about having the right system for the moment. His mentality has shifted from playing our football to winning the next game. That's a huge change, and it's what separates good managers from great ones. You can see that mindset clearly in his recent lineups. Against Liverpool, he used a compact 5-4-1, tight, disciplined, defensive structure built for countering transitions. Then just a week later against Brighton, he threw that away and went bold with a front foot 4-2-4 shape that looked nothing like what he's used before. That's not a small tweak, that's a philosophical shift. He's no longer trying to impose one identity on every opponent. He's tailoring the identity to each challenge. That's tactical adaptability. In that Brighton game, you could see it so clearly. Ahmad and Dalot sometimes pushed high like fullbacks in a four-man defense. Casemiro and Bruno operated in a flat double pivot, and the two wide forwards stretched the pitch to its limits. It was practically a 4-2-4 in possession. Amorim built width, verticality, and numbers around the box, not just to dominate possession, but to suffocate Brighton's midfield from both sides. The fluidity in their transitions, the timing of their movement, the coordination in pressing, all of it showed a coach who's finally comfortable being unpredictable. And that unpredictability is starting to make United dangerous again. Amorim isn't stubbornly protecting a single idea anymore. He's playing with structure, but within that structure, he's letting the players express themselves. You see it in how Bruno's freedom has evolved, how Casemiro's deeper role allows United to recycle possession faster, and how Šeško's pressing intelligence is now a trigger for the whole team. The most impressive part? This United side isn't even at 100% yet. They're still building chemistry, still getting key players back, still learning how to fully execute Amorim's tactical layers. Mason Mount, for example, hasn't even been fully integrated into this setup. You can tell Amorim is easing him in, experimenting with his positioning, sometimes as a narrow winger, sometimes as a third midfielder. Once Mount finds consistency in that role, United's transitions will become even sharper because he's the kind of player who can link defense and attack in a single touch. And then there's Lisandro Martínez, the player United have missed the most. Amorim's entire build-up structure will take another leap forward once Martinez returns. He's not just a defender, he's a playmaker from the back. His ability to split lines, play those disguised passes through the first press, and switch the point of attack instantly, that's something no one else in the squad can replicate. Amorim loves defenders who can step into midfield with the ball, and Martinez fits that mold perfectly. He gives you progression and composure in one package. Once he's back, United's build-up won't just be functional, it'll be dynamic. It's also important to mention that Amorim's willingness to adapt doesn't just make United more flexible, it makes them harder to analyse. Opponents can no longer prepare for how United plays, because United no longer plays just one way. One week they're sitting deep and countering, the next they're pressing high and dominating territory. That unpredictability is what makes title-winning teams so hard to stop. You can tell that Amorim now views every game as its own problem to solve. He's not chasing the idea of perfection anymore, he's chasing solutions. And when a coach starts to think that way, the team evolves faster. The players begin to trust the plan more because they see that every adjustment has logic behind it. There's no blind faith, it's all calculated decisions. What makes this shift even more exciting is that it's just the beginning. Amorim's Manchester United is still raw, still developing, still learning how to move together in every phase of play. But the foundation is there: adaptability, intelligence, and clarity. That's something United haven't had in a very long time. And if this is what they look like now, inconsistent but improving, imagine what happens when Martinez is back, Mount fully clicks, and Amorim's ideas are second nature to everyone on the pitch. That's when United stops being a project and starts being a genuine contender. And if that's the direction they're heading, then maybe, just maybe, the Premier League's Manchester United problem is only getting started. But what do you think? Should the Premier League be scared? Let me know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.